Hello, this is my next video about teaching reading skills in the English language classroom. This is to help you prepare for your next TP. I'll just put it on a full slideshow. So this is a lesson that I have delivered a few times to TP students, to be fair. You can see the topic of the lesson. And this is a great way to start the lesson with pictures so that the students can immediately identify what the lesson is going to be about. Now, let's just clarify to start with, this is reading only. During TP, we schedule to have a reading lesson and then later on a listening lesson. We don't mix them up or combine them. There's a couple of reasons for that, and that's for another day. But I think it's a good idea just to focus on one reading text. Let's have a quick think about texts because, you know, there is a billion texts out there on the internet and other places. So choose something that is uplifting, perhaps something that's new to the students, something that's a bit different. And you're probably looking for most levels between 100 to maybe 180 words, something like that. Slightly lower levels, perhaps a little bit less, about 80 words. That's a sort of a general rule of thumb. So my lesson is about chocolate, and I had some questions for them to start with. So this is kind of my warmer, just to get them warmed up into the topic of chocolate. I would set them up in breakout rooms and get them to discuss those 4 questions. When they come back, I would probably do the feedback. I just ask, like breakout room 1, ask them question 1, for example, and group 2, I'd ask them question 2, just to make it a little bit shorter, asking everybody in the class all the questions, you know, obviously it's quite time consuming. And this is just the warmer, so you want it quite concise. Next in my reading lesson, I'm going to pre-teach the vocabulary. So something like between 5 to 8 new words, words or phrases that you think would be a little bit difficult for the students. We can pre-teach them here so that they're not stumbling along that sort of new vocabulary and not wondering what to do with it, not understanding it and having to go to a dictionary. That kind of then slows down the reading. So if we pre-teach some of the more challenging words, then hopefully that'll let the reading flow a lot better. I've got my words down this side. I've put the parts of speech and I've numbered them as well. The definitions are labeled with a letter so we can just match across. So for example, number 1, bumped into, phrasal verb. Yes, to meet, but it's unplanned, for example. So I would demo the first one before I get them to do this. I'd get either share a screenshot or get them to take a photo, share a screenshot in the chat box, set a time limit, ICQ, check that they understand what the task is, and then put them into the breakout rooms. This would be a nice pair activity, and it probably wouldn't take them too long. So they have now figured out what these words mean if they didn't know them before, and I would think about asking them a prediction question. Do you think the text will be positive or negative about the topic of chocolate? So we have some words here that do actually craving, confess, hidden. They kind of do hint that it's possibly a slightly negative story. It's not too negative, but when I've done this lesson, they usually kind of get the feeling that there's maybe something that goes wrong or something along those lines. Now I'm going to show you the text. Here is the text all on one slide with 2 questions in blue at the bottom here. It looks like a lot of words, doesn't it? I would screenshot it and put it in the chat so that they can look at it on their own device. I would also keep this on the screen so that they can read it off their main screen, for example. There's a couple of different ways you can deal with such a long text. I think this was about 180 words or something. So I'm just going to show you I've set some questions. I've not called them gist questions to the students, but they are gist questions. So fill in the gap and explain what Cheryl was doing at the end. It is on the slide with the story. It's down here in blue, and the gap that they're going to fill is here in red, so it stands out. So reading for gist is reading for the general overview of the text. It's not taking very long to do it. It's a bit like how you read a newspaper and you choose the stories that you then read in detail. You're just kind of looking at different things, just getting a kind of the general idea. So I want my students to do this quite fast as well, just to practice those skills of looking across it quickly. And when I say 2 minutes, they usually jump off their chairs, but it doesn't have to be exactly 2 minutes. It could be 2 minutes and a bit or something like that. I can kind of watch them and see how they're getting on, if I think they've finished or not. The questions are set here at the end. This is the first question, fill in the gap, and then explain what Cheryl was going to do, and the answers here too. So they do kind of really need to go through the whole thing. But as I say, it's a quick view. Then I would ask them to tell me what they think these answers are. I've just highlighted in yellow the vocab that we pre-taught. I'll go back to this question slide. So we've covered the first one. So they've now got a general idea of what this story is about. And then my specific questions or reading for detail is this next section. So they're going to look at the text again and find signs or a sign of Cheryl's addiction to chocolate. And I've put an example. She'd put on a lot of weight. So if we go back to the text, we're going to have a quick look. And I would use my annotate when I'm doing the feedback to underline where it is in the text. When they are actually doing this task, I would ask them if they want to, they can annotate on the text where the answers are. So Cheryl asked for a hot chocolate and 2 pieces of cake. She's got cravings for chocolate. She had a box of chocolate bars hidden away. So when we do the feedback, we can either look at what they've annotated, or if that's not really how you've set it up, I can annotate and I can draw the lines on the text. This is really helpful for them to find the answers. We do this a lot with exams and things because sometimes it's not so easy to find the answers. But if we do that in feedback, it helps them recognize where those answers are through the reading text. So I'll just take those off. So we have done a gist reading, we've done a specific reading, and then I could always say to them, are there any other examples in this text? Those slightly higher level students that have seen a bit more, perhaps they read through it quite quickly, they might be able to tell me. But if they don't, that's also okay. It was just an extension question, really. I could write the answers here and show that, or we've gone through the answers and highlighted them on the text anyway. The next part of the reading lesson is a more production type task. So I've set a speaking task. In pairs, they're going to tell their partner about an addiction they have to one of these items in the thought cloud. So I've made them quite light-hearted. So there's jelly babies and a crossword puzzle. I've put pictures here to help with that because the vocabulary. I think they'll know Facebook and Netflix, but you could always explain them. You could give a demonstration, you know, just to kind of really make sure they understand these instructions. They're going to discuss together how the addiction affects their lives. What are the signs? Can you think of 3 or 4 ideas? And I've said it can be funny. It doesn't have to be too serious. So again, I'd set this up in breakout rooms. So in pairs, for example, I would set a time limit, probably for this 10 minutes. And I would ICQ, I'd check the instructions by saying, what are you going to do in the breakout room to one of the students, get them to relay it back to me so that I can check that they've understood what the task is. And then when they finish and they come back for feedback, I could get a couple of ideas off them. I could just ask 1 or 2 people. I could do some delayed error correction when I've been listening and monitoring to the breakout rooms during the task. I could make some notes of some errors I hear. But it's quite nice as well just to hear what their ideas are too. Now, I could also set up a writing task. They could write an email asking for advice, telling the recipient about the addiction and how it started and the problems you're having, for example. Now, they could work in pairs for this as well, because again, it can be a collaborative idea. They could get a good start on the email if I've got time. If we run out of time, they could do the rest of it for homework. So this lesson does have some similarities to a language lesson. And this was one of my previous videos about planning it in thirds. So I've got potentially the first 20 minutes. The intro is the warmer, pre-teach, perhaps the prediction question. Then we're moving on to the actual reading. So they're reading for gist. And overall, that's probably going to be about 10-ish minutes once you've done the feedback and everything, although it is the quicker exercise. And then the specific reading would be a good 10 minutes as well. But that is kind of the accuracy, because that will bring out the language that they're finding in the text itself. And then I set the speaking task where they're discussing one of the things they might be addicted to, like jelly babies or crossword. So this is where they're starting to practice their fluency. It was accuracy more in the middle stage, but here it's more about being more fluent, practicing that. This is a freer production stage. So I want them to really sort of go for it and sort of stretch themselves and play with the language. So that's a chance to do that here. This should always be, as the wider part of the triangle, the biggest, meatiest task. These other ones are just setting it up in order to get to this freer practice. So I have put 20, 20, 20, but you might shorten that to sort of 15, and maybe even a bit more than 20. You could kind of work with those. Just make sure that within that stage, you've included some sort of feedback and potentially some error correction as well, delayed error correction, once you were monitoring what they were talking about. So this is just a very quick matching exercise just for the structures and the stages. So the lead-in, I introduced the theme of the lesson of chocolate. The pre-teach, I chose some words that perhaps were going to be a bit difficult for this class. And we went through the definitions so that they had a better idea and it would not prevent the flow of reading. The predictive task I've put in blue because it is a little bit optional, I think. We do often do this, but it's not a big problem if you don't, okay? But here they predict what they think they will read or listen to. It is quite a useful skill to have for exams when they're starting to think about what's going to be in the exam paper. So when they sit down to the exam and the first question is about, I don't know, rabbits or something, and then they think, right, okay, so what will the big exam question be about? And it could be rabbits for the environmental challenges we have, or that rabbits face at the moment or something. The idea of sort of predicting and just thinking forward to what they may see or hear is quite useful in exams when they're under a time limit. I said about reading for gist. So this is the quick task, or the quicker task. 2 questions, 2 minutes, for example, is about right. Then, of course, do the feedback afterwards. And then I've also put down reading for specific information. Now, this is where they use their sort of more scanning skills because they're looking for certain words, perhaps, words or phrases. Again, 5 to 8 questions for this, and probably about the same time in minutes. It might take you a bit longer, up to sort of 10 minutes for this, because it will take them time to get through that text. And that was quite a long text, my chocolate text. And then a follow-on task is the task that continues the theme of the lesson. Now, I chose a speaking task and then possibly a writing, or they could have that as homework. So very clear and good chances to use the language that's been covered in the reading text, and for them to collaborate with another student, therefore practicing their English and putting something together. You know, there is a product at the end of it. There's ideas or an email, for example. So all of those things are really valuable. The types of texts that we use, they could vary. I've seen things used out of magazines like National Geographic, for example. Some of the textbooks use those. I've used texts from the BBC, just using the link, for example, and playing about with some of those articles. They could be news, or they could be more just general information, you know, something about the environment or travel or something like that, that happens to be on the BBC or other news type websites. So blog posts, of course, also count. It could be not necessarily an organizational blog, but an independent personal blog that somebody writes about maybe their country or something, or their city, and you want to use that. Other things are recipes work well, especially for lower levels, and possibly short stories, or even something like you could have something even like, there is TED Talks, which is listening, but it could be used, if you get the transcript, you could make it into a text or something, you could adapt it. Of course, you can write something yourself as well. We can use things that we have created. This lesson structure is for skills, so of course it applies to listening as well. And I've said about TED Talks, they're ideal for listening because they do have the transcript as well. So you've got the words there in case your students do need to see the transcript. And that's particularly useful for lower levels. So there are a few other things that you could do for listening. You could do an interview off the radio, for example, a song, or the weather report. Those are all clear sort of listening type texts, but they are particularly good for English language practice as well. So I think that is it for today. I will stop there, and I'll see you next time.